I'm Brent Leggs. I am the Executive Director of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I want to thank you and welcome you to PastForward. This session is titled Memorialization, Confederate Statues, African American Heritage and Public Spaces, which is a special program of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. I also want to thank our special guest, Mayor Levar Stoney of Richmond, Virginia. It's an honor to share space and time with you, Mayor Stoney. Today, the Confederate statues debate rages once again. As we come to a reckoning with America's Confederate past and see long simmering racial and ethnic tensions return to a boil. This intensity pervades every aspect of our politics, culture, society, and public spaces. Others are debating whether to rename public buildings and streets and remove public statues and Civil War flags. Many public officials are navigating previously uncharted waters. They are responding to activist demands to remove Confederate memorials from public spaces. Importantly, as statues come down in some municipalities, public officials across the nation are also supporting community-based efforts to preserve important Black landmarks and to create new memorials that acknowledge and commemorate African American history, such as Richmond's Shackle. At the same time, national protests following the horrific killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others, as well as the controversial national debate over Confederate and other divisive monuments, has sparked a full re-examination of the role of history and preservation as a way to advance racial justice and equity. As preservationists, we must explore viable ways to organize ourselves and national funders around this issue and to envision an American landscape where more African American cultural assets are preserved and revered to tell the full American history. Let's start our conversation. I want to first start off, Mayor, by getting to know you as the man, the politician, and the preservationist, and how your understanding of the power of preservation has evolved over time. So my question for you, Mayor Stoney, tell us about your personal connection to the issue of preservation, memorialization, and reconciliation.
Well, Brent, thank you for allowing me to have another conversation with you about such an important topic. And I think the last time we had a conversation about this specific topic was after the incidents in Charlottesville at the Tom Tom Festival, I believe. And so we talked about this, and we talked about where there's the room for opportunity. There's just numerous amount of opportunities out there. And we touched on this topic right here. And who knew, fast forward some years later, that we'd be able to talk about what we've done in the course of the last few months. I think you got to start with a little personal connection, just my story. I was raised by a grandmother who grew up in the Deep South, in South Carolina, in the Low Country, and we know about the rich African American history in the Low Country. I was born in New York, and we found our way to Virginia, and I grew up in Yorktown, where we know Yorktown being the end of the American Revolution there, right? And I know, the battlefields, there's a lot of memorialization and preservation going on there, but didn't see a lot of, in terms of Black history, being preserved or even spoken about in Yorktown. And then going off to college, moved to Richmond, and now I moved, I feel like, to the Mecca of, I think, Black history, particularly when it comes to telling the story of injustices and racism It's kind of baked unfortunately, into Richmond's DNA. I like to say that, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly in Richmond. And we have to find ways to tell the full and complete story of Richmond, particularly the story of those who built our city. They shed their blood and their sweat and their tears. And, I think now we are making amends for not fully telling those full truths. And so, I think about what we've done over the course of the last 4 years, and erecting a monument to Maggie Lena Walker, to renaming a stretch of road in the city for tennis great Arthur Ashe, to have some serious discussions about what are we going to do with the Shackle Bottom Memorial area, where this was the second busiest domestic trade port in the United States of America. And then you juxtapose that with Monument Avenue, where we had a number of Confederate monuments that tree-lined boulevard. We went ahead and had those tough discussions, and we moved ahead with removal. I guess now I'm personally connected to all things, what we did in terms of preservation and memorialization, but also just the removal of those Confederate monuments. And what I tell folks all the time, Brent, is that I want to be known for a whole lot more than just removing racist Confederate monuments. I want to be known for transforming public education, transforming public housing, but also just righting the wrongs in terms of telling the full history of Black and brown people, not only in this city, but also in the context of American history as well. And I think when you look at Monument Avenue, you look at Shackle Bottom, it's sort of like a microcosm of America today, telling you, right, you have the forgotten story, the untold story in Shackle Bottom, and then you see the lionization of people who tried, who made a serious effort to make sure that people like me don't ever get a chance to hold offices like this, yet be educated in this country. And so in a time of, people ask whether or not is this a true reckoning on race, I always say to them, Brent, the proof will be in the pudding. The proof will be in the pudding, because if the disparities and the gaps between Black and brown people, between the have and have-nots, remain what they are today, that those disparities remain the same in 2030, then we will have missed our moment. We will have missed our moment. And I do this work because I don't want my city to miss our moment, and I surely don't want my country to miss our moment as well. So,
well, I agree with you. And when you opened up and kind of started with Tom Tom, and I remember us having those conversations because, as you remember, we started the Action Fund after the tragic events in Charlottesville. And we wanted to demonstrate that preservation was a tool to advance social innovation, mitigate the cultural crisis, and begin the hard work of telling the full American story. And you just summed it up when you framed preservation as equity, equitable interpretation, leveraging preservation as a tool for economic development and revitalization. And I've always seen Shackle Bottom as the origin story to Monument Avenue, and the Confederate memorials that once stood there, and the one that still stands. And in many ways, Richmond is the epicenter of reimagining American culture in the United States. So
I would say, Brent, I want to move from us being the epicenter for Confederate history, the epicenter for for slavery in terms of the selling of Black bodies, and we can be that epicenter for reimagining preservation, memorialization in a 21st century context.
I agree. And that's why I think what Rumors of War by Kende Wiley, and that kind of reimagining of memorialization and reimagining the way that we understand history by linking kind of culture and art, and the fact that Richmond is holding space for this kind of reimagining is really cool.
I like the fact that the community has put, they've been hands-on literally about this as well. And you saw that the New York Times, recognized that Richmond had one of the most, I guess you say, most seen protest art since World War II, I guess, in terms of the way, those who've protested the racial injustices in our country have reclaimed the Lee Monument and just brought a different perspective in terms of contextualization of that monument. And, we had a discussion about that, as a Monument Avenue Commission that we initiated about contextualization, removal, or just keeping things just the same, or just erecting new monuments. And I think what you've seen from the community is if you want contextualization, reinterpretation, this is what it's going to look like.
I agree. It's funny. So we've been following all of the activities in Richmond, and to see the way the community has reclaimed space and heritage, and almost the cloaking of that monument through graffiti and paint, or even having a makeshift basketball court and gardens and marching bands. This, in many ways, for me, has made me think about the future memorialization of Confederate monuments. Personally, I was leaning more towards contextualization or relocation. I have this kind of dream in my mind that our nation will develop a shared vision and plan for the future memorialization of Confederate monuments, that we would together relocate those to a selected landscape, creating a landscape of justice, positioning them where their back is turned to the nation, where we have information to tell the truth about their meaning, and that we never invest any public money or private in their maintenance and preservation. And as they stand as ruins in their own decay, that we could measure our social progress by that decay and that ruin. Because this work that we're talking about, really preservation seems to be the tool. The monuments, in essence, are a tool. Shackle Bottom is a tool, but it really is about discussing the impact on people's lives today.
That's right.
And go ahead, Mayor.
And when people, because this debate, as you said, it is at times it boiled over, and some folks say, well, Mr. Mayor, this is just performative. This is just symbolism. And I think we now realize that symbolism, imagery matters. Placemaking matters. Yeah. And yes, I do believe that we need to take substantive steps to root out the racism that is found in a number of systems, from the education system, the housing system, healthcare system. I agree with that. But you also cannot ignore the fact that racist symbolism, racist imagery can also, I think, it sends a message to Black and brown people that they are less than, or they are inferior. And I think that's why local governments and government in general has to step in and actually provide spaces where Black and brown citizens, residents can see themselves in the work. Because guess what? We did not get here. These cities, these places, did not get there by themselves. A lot of times it was Black and brown hands that erected, or at least provided the labor for some of these places in the past. So I think you got to do both, and we're surely working on trying to do so.
So you mentioned in your earlier remarks why Shackle Bottom is important, but why would you say that Shackle Bottom is significant not only locally in Richmond's history, but also nationally?
Yes, it is amazing when you dig deep into the history of Shackle Bottom, it being the second busiest slave port, I think, domestically, outside of New Orleans, I believe.
Yeah.
and the origin of black people in this country, a lot of their families came right through Richmond, through Virginia. And so Richmond and Shackle it's at the center of Black life in the United States of America. But here's the thing, Brent, I don't think enough people know that. And that's why I believe that Shackle Bottom, it can be I've always believed that it is an untold story that needs to be shouted from the mountaintop and invested in, and not seen as, I'll admit, it has been racially charged. It's been politically charged over the many, many decades of discussing what's the next steps on Shackle Bottom, but it is a story like no other. It's authentic. It's real. When I think about, as a mayor, about placemaking in my city and preservation and memorialization, there are very few localities in this country that have what we have here locally. And I know we've struggled on what we should do about it and how it should look and who it should involve. But I think one thing we all agree on, that we have to do something. And I believe, we could not have predicted this time after the murder of George Floyd, a pandemic as well. But there's no time like today. I think we have the attention of a national audience about how we go about placemaking and preservation of these sort of spaces right now. And I think people are going to find out, that Richmond, you may have some family, some kin in Virginia, but you may find out that, man, it was my family that actually went through Richmond, traveled through Richmond at some point, looking years and years, decades and decades, generations and generations. And I think that's a story that has to be a part of not just the lives of Richmonders here locally, but just the country. This is I think, when you look at, the Lumpkins jail and the terror that went through there and just the atrocities that were committed there, how we can go about letting folks know that this is now, we get a chance to actually tell that story, but also use it as a center for good, right? A center for positive activity. And that's what we're going to be working on together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And after pretty much this year in 2020 with Black Lives Matter movement, preservationists have been having difficult conversations about our relevancy, and we are starting to use new language and frame preservation as racial justice, as equity, talking about preservation as a form of truth and reconciliation. And what I just heard you describe, I could see in my mind that Richmond Shackle Bottom has the potential to become a mecca for Black America and all Americans to fully understand the American legacy and systems of slavery. And that, as a placemaking strategy, I think would be transformative for Richmond, given that it was the former Confederate, former capital of the Confederacy.
That's right. And, I think, looking at a more global view of all this, from my perspective as mayor, because everybody always wants to know, we want to hear about, what are the economic development benefits and whatnot. And I say, let's move economic development to the side. Let's start with history. Let's start with preservation first, at the center of what we're trying to do here in the bottom. And I really do believe if you build it, if you cultivate it, everything else will come with it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And we've got plenty of data to help you make that business case for preservation. We know that preservation is economic development. It catalyzes revitalization. You can blend the old and new, and as you said, leverage preservation as a placemaking strategy, especially for an urban center like Richmond.
That's right.
So, Mayor, I'm curious how you are collaborating with local preservationists, community organizations, and others to protect Shackle Bottom, or even think about the kind of new memorialization of Monument Avenue?
Yeah, I think before you move forward on any sort of project, whether it's Shackle Bottom or whether it's Monument Avenue, you have to center it with robust robust community engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And Shackle Bottom, I took Shackle Bottom as a case study to the Mayor's Institute on City Design, tied in with the National League of Cities as well. And I remember just kind of like giving them a heads up that this is politically charged, it's racially charged. I don't know if y'all can help me out at all, but I just come here with my head down. And I remember leaving there with my head held high because they told me, it's like, you have something that's so authentic and so real, you have to make sure that you do something about it. You have to make sure during your time as mayor, my 8 years, that we make this at the centerpiece of who we are. And let this tell the story of who Richmond is today in the 2020s compared to Monument Avenue. And we had, the Rose Fellowship as well. We were part of that. We made that our case study for the Rose Fellowship. And that was the first time, really, Brent, that we actually brought people around the table who were talking past one another. We found out that we actually there were a lot more people who shared what should happen in Shackle Bottom, shared more in common than we actually disagreed in. It was all about bringing folks to the table. And so we brought those who have a background in preservation and memorialization to the table. We brought those from the business community to the table as well, longtime academics and activists to the table who had been talking past each other or even were never at the table before. And what we were able to get to is a commitment from the city. We already had some skin in the game from the state, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, but a commitment from me and from the city in terms of investing capital dollars there, but also starting off with the planning dollars for a memorial campus that will be inclusive of a heritage center or a museum as well to tell the full and complete story about what occurred in Shackle Bottom. We have to use that same concept, I think, on how we go about memorialization of Monument Avenue too, beginning with this robust community engagement process that now involves just the neighbors of those who live right off of that grand avenue, but also community voices from throughout the city, I think. And I think you see that the community wants to be involved already in what the future looks like on Monument Avenue. I've heard things from green space, inclusive and welcoming green space, to fountains, to erecting new monuments, to heroes and sheroes in Richmond as well. I think that's a robust discussion that has to happen before we move forward there. But also, I say this. I believe that we can chew gum and run at the same time. I always tell Richmonders that we can do that. But also, we have to, before we redirect the conversation to Monument Avenue, that we have to begin the work. Groundbreakings, you name it, on Shackle Bottom before. My fear is that because of the location of Monument Avenue, that Shackle Bottom once again gets sidelined. We can't move forward with Monument Avenue until we actually have what the future is going to look like in Shackle Bottom. And so I always tell folks we have to redirect our energy, redirect our mind, because I know that Monument Avenue has been at the center of everything throughout the social unrest. But we have to remember we have a slave burial site right in our downtown, in the old plat of our downtown, that we have to pay some serious attention to. And once we have the direction there, then we can phase in what we're going to do with Monument Avenue as well. Now, I believe we can do both at the same time, but I don't want us to get distracted. You know how easily, Brent, it gets when, it's almost like the shiny object sometimes. Yeah, we must move our attention here. I've already heard people say, we'll raise money to do it. We'll raise money to start focusing on Monument Avenue. And I'm saying, whoa, this has been sitting desolate for decades. And I haven't seen anybody step up and say we're going to raise money for the memorialization and preservation of those of the slave graves that lie there today. So let's not be distracted. Let's not be distracted in this moment.
So I love that you just said that, because that's our feeling at the National Trust too, that as important as the Confederate monuments conversation is, we don't want to see it distract away from the thousands of African American historic places and sites that have been undervalued and underfunded for decades, if not centuries. And that is where the nation's attention needs to be, in ensuring that these stories, these landscapes, these buildings gets told and preserved for future generations.
Yeah, so I already feel the urgency on some people's behalf on moving forward. I'm just like, I've seen this game before. Let's be cognizant of that. We've been we should be focused somewhere that we haven't been focused. Let this moment serve as a reminder that we have been distracted by the symbols of racism and the Confederacy, and maybe we should redouble our efforts to ensure that Black lives truly do matter.
Yes,
in this moment in time, in terms of in preservation and memorialization.
That's exactly it. And I like to say that not until Black history matters will Black lives matter. And I want you to know that the National Trust, we have cared about the future of Shackle Bottom for a long time. Know that we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you. We really see Shackle Bottom and Monument Avenue as demonstration projects for the nation that other communities can replicate in the years to come. So I was so proud of you when you made the decision to include Shackle Bottom in the city's land use plan. Can you share a little bit about that decision and how you came to that?
Yeah, I'm sure you're talking about our Richmond 300 plan, about how Richmond will be 300 years old in 2037. And we want to grow as a city. We want to densify. We want more affordable housing. But also I think we need some proper placemaking as well. And we got a number of different sites around the city, whether it's in our downtown, whether it's the western part of our city and the greater Scotts Addition area along 95 that are seen as high value economic development centers for the city. But I've always, as a former resident of Shackle Bottom, I've also seen Shackle Bottom, I think, could be a driver for economic development and for future revenue as well. And I think at the center of that, we've made a number of investments in whether from the federal government, the state government, and the Main Street station, that train hub, that transportation hub right there. Also in our 17th Street Plaza, but we have a missing link. And the missing link to me is the memorialization over in Shackle Bottom, the Shackle Bottom Memorial campus. And we've made that. We've worked on a small area plan to plan out how we want to see this. The Shackle Alliance, that collaboration of different stakeholders from different facets of society here in Richmond have gone around the table, and they've also see this as a catalyst for economic development as well. And so how can you create a master plan, a comprehensive plan for growth in the city without including what I believe it could be the future catalyst for growth in Shackle Bottom in this Memorial Park, and so Memorial Campus, inclusive of a heritage center and a museum. And so, yes, it's a part of our Richmond 300 plan. It's community driven as well. Voices were heard as well. And now I think that folks are now looking for us I think we are on the clock, Brent. We're on the clock. And, this stuff takes time. I recognize that. But that's why I stated earlier that we can't be distracted. And we also have to keep up the momentum as well. Are we ever going to have all the money we want at the same time? No, never. Mm-hmm. No. But what the people deserve is a detailed, equitable plan about development in that area, which is an inclusive of preservation and memorialization. And that's exactly what we will produce for our community. And I think there are going to be generations and generations beyond me in my administration who will be the beneficiary of something, and beyond just Richmond as well. I believe this will be our gift to the country in this time, our gift to the country. And one of the great things I like to highlight out of this as well, Brent, is that we have great partners in this. One of the greatest partners we have is Virginia Union University, because they were birthed right there out of this footprint in Shackle Bottom and the Lumpkins Jail and in the Devil's Half Acre right there, become a high quality institution for the education of Black people. And so there already has been some good born out of the atrocities of the institution of slavery. And I think this could continue to be this is just another gift that we can add, we can provide to our country and to our city.
Well, we were delighted in 2018 when we announced our very first round of Action Fund grantees and provided a grant to Preservation Virginia, who partnered with BUU and others to develop the equitable development plan for Shackle Bottom. And it really was a conversation starter, but linking together preservation, memorialization, and economic development. And hopefully we can build on that and really demonstrate that preservation is that economic driver. But as you just said, that this project is in service of our nation and future generations. So I see preservation as being political. And given the seat that you hold, what are some lessons that you've learned with that intersection between politics and preservation?
You're right, Brent. I think that's an understatement about, preservation being political. What I've come to find out, when you are focused on trying to tell the full story, when you're trying to tell a history that is untold, some believe it's an indictment, right? Because history can be an indictment. And it's like, well, I didn't do that, or it wasn't me. Why am I being called out for this? And that's how it may feel at the time. But I say, well, put yourself in the shoes of Black and brown people who are essentially written out of the history books, right? Written out of the truth about the creation and the formation of this country and of your city. Means there's some people's lives who've been essentially erased. And, when I decided that I was going to move forward with first having the discussion about Monument Avenue, which is the third rail of politics here in Richmond, even talking about what to do with Monument Avenue brought a lot of vitriol my way. And then when I just made the decision, evoking my emergency powers during the social unrest, and then moving forward with removal on July 1 of this year of Stonewall Jackson and the other monuments that line Monument Avenue and every other Confederate monument in the city outside of Robert E. Lee, it brought vitriol like no other, Brent. And nowadays, it really does. I'm blown away by what I've been told by Richmonders, some of them who've lived all their life in Richmond, who said, you know what, Mr. Mayor, I'm a white man. I lived here in Richmond my whole life, and I am at peace with what you did. I did not know, and these are grown men telling me, I did not know what this had been doing, what this said about our city for so long. I just thought there was beautiful works of art. Yes, they were beautiful, but the message it was sending to essentially half the city, right? And there were even Black residents of mine who told me at the time that, Mr. Mayor, now you don't go around messing with this. We've worked very hard to get to a place where, we can live side by side with one another, and all you're doing is just kicking a hornet's nest. And I said to this individual, a senior leader in my community, that I have to do this because what I see is a wrong. They should have never been erected in the first place. And they obviously prayed for my safety, and but also were one of the first people to encourage me and to support me when I made that decision. Now, some say I would not have done it the way you did it, Mr. Mayor, and I said, well, I did it because we were in an emergency situation. But also, I know it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. And what I learned from my friend Mitch Landrieu in New Orleans, he came to Richmond and we did a talk like this together. And he said, when the mayor does make a move, y'all got to have his back, right? He said, I lost so many friends after I made the move on removal in New Orleans. And, the mayor's going to be out in the cold. I hope y'all have his back when the decision happens, when the move is made. And I got to say, I'm grateful for my residents. I'm grateful for Richmonders, young and old, black and white, who've encouraged me and supported me through this and told me, I have your back and thank you for the bold move. Those monuments were a long, dark shadow over the city of Richmond. And we feel like we've been unshackled. And once again, back to what I said earlier, Brent, this was the symbolism, but now we have to add the substance behind the symbolism. Now we have to say, you know what, we made the tough call to remove this long dark shadow. Now let's prove to the world that we can do right by lifting up Black and brown people through our systems, the different systems of government and healthcare and education, but also we do right by lifting up their stories as well. And I think that's the opportunity we have with Shackle Bottom. Once again, back to that connection, right, between Shackle Bottom and also Monument Avenue. Once again, I say, guys, we may have been the epicenter of some of the unrest this past year, but we have the goal. We have the opportunity to be the epicenter of reconciliation and in preservation of Black voices and Black lives. And, Brent, I know we are in a pandemic and I know we saw a lot here in 2020, but I'm even more optimistic about what the future holds for my city, but also for the country.
That is beautiful and well stated. So I could ask you a couple more questions, but I feel like that was a beautiful ending to this conversation. If you don't mind, I just want to ask you, what lesson would you share with other mayors across the United States, given your work over the last several years in building community, organizing the community around its cultural heritage, and also dealing with this in the middle of a cultural and economic and health crisis? What's your advice?
You know what, Brent, what I've learned, and advice I would give to my friends who are mayors throughout this country, elected leaders, it revolves around my definition of leadership, right? I think, I got elected to mayor when I was 35. I took the oath of office at 35 years old. And, I had a background of working in politics and in campaign politics and whatnot prior to my public service. And, we think that leadership equals popularity, right? We think leadership, they love this individual. They must be leading the way. She must be leading the way because she's loved by the community. She has high popularity ratings. And what I've learned over the course of time is leadership is making those tough calls, making those tough decisions. And in an environment like I have here in Richmond, the former capital of the Confederacy, making the tough call on Monument Avenue, removal of those monuments, not just on Monument Avenue, but throughout my city. Making a tough call on, we're going to make an investment, a serious investment in Shackle Bottom, and we're going to lead the way. They may not garner you a lot of love, a lot of support, particularly where you might be located. And a lot of this is happening in the South, in the American South. Yeah. And to me, it just goes back to doing right and doing what's right and being able to look yourself in the mirror and appreciate the reflection that's coming back across that image that's coming right back across that mirror right there. And I sleep well at night because I know we did the right thing. And there are some folks who will say, "Oh, Mr. Mayor, you're erasing history," or "What are you doing? You're changing my city and whatnot." And I'm able to sleep at night and able to appreciate that image that's coming across that mirror because I know we're doing the right thing. And we may not see those benefits today in 2020, but I say let's do a rewind in 2030, 2035, and 2040, and I'll guarantee you we'll look back at the history of what happened and say, "Oh, we did the right thing. We did the right thing," and I can live with that. I know there's always people who take a lot of political calculations before taking these sort of steps in terms of placemaking and preservation. But I will say that your community, you may not see the benefits today, but 10, 20 years from now, you're going to see the benefits economically, culturally. You will see those benefits, and it's going to be good, not just for Black and brown people. It will be good for everyone. It will be good for all people. And those are the sort of strides I think our communities have to make in these turbulent, difficult times. Not every year won't be 2020. But guess what? There are still some communities today who are struggling with the issue of race, who are further behind in Richmond in terms of this sort of work. That it might be tough to make those calls, but I tell you, it truly is no better time to start healing than today. And placemaking to me, preservation to me, is an easy way to start the healing process. The easiest way to start the healing process.
That was beautifully said. And I want to thank you for being on the right side of history. I want to thank you for being a positive example and leader for Richmond and for our nation. I love that you can go to sleep at night and that when you look in the mirror, that you are reflecting back to the city of Richmond and our nation, the new contemporary cultural values of inclusion, of reconciliation, of truth, and that you understand the imbued power of preservation to be a catalyst for revitalization. You are someone that we highly respect. We thank you for having preservation as part of your administrative priorities. And we look forward to collaborating with you in the future to realize your bold vision for Shackle Bottom.
Thank you, Brent. I look forward to our continued partnership, and let's make something great together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.